on both sides. The photograph is not meant to replace the work, but photography and there is a very interesting relationship between photography and sculpture. You know, I think Brancusi set that precedent of using photography as a way of talking about his sculpture, describing his sculpture, explaining the relationship to the sculpture, to light, to space, and to other things. So I think it's a very appropriate way to talk about it, but it's not a replacement. Whether, I don't really have a choice whether they survive or not. Ice melts, rain dries up. So if I'm going to work with these materials, I have to accept that they will pass. But on a deeper level, and I do feel a sense of loss. You know, when you've made so much effort into making a work. But then we all have to deal with loss in life. And it's something we all have to do. I think that it's also important that the work is tested and seen physically. So that's another reason why I make the projects like I'm doing now, that people can engage with. But I couldn't make those other things if I didn't have this very intense personal work that only a few people see by chance. Well, there's a strong spiritual aspect to what I do, but it's not a religious one. And I think that trying to understand my relationship with my own nature and the nature of a place is a very powerful, important thing to do. And trying to understand things like loss, decay, and death. And whenever you work with nature, there's always that sense of decay and loss, as well as growth and birth. And so that is the spiritual aspect of it. And I think one of the most tangible results of working in a place is your feeling for that place. It's like the wall that I'm working on in Rio. So we were talking about, well, what happens when it's taken away and the wall filled in or whatever. And, well, there'll always be the doorway. And if they take the door out, there'll always be the place where the door was. And there'll always be the memory of that place being there. And any of you who go in there, even once it's gone, will always know what was there and will see that wall in a way you never thought of before. And I think that's what another spiritual aspect of it is, that you go beyond the surface appearance of things in life.
E outra pergunta é de quanto ao desenho, no processo. Como o desenho entra no trabalho dele?
I found I went to art school, and I found working in the studio very difficult. I found that whole idea of a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper very difficult to deal with. And this idea that somehow as artists, young artists, we express ourselves. Because I didn't have anything I really wanted to express. I'm only young, I was only 18. You have to live a little bit before you. And I think at the moment, the similar kind of context is the conceptual aspect of making art. Art schools now teach a very strong conceptual background to the work, so the brain which is okay, but I still feel that sometimes you need to just make things. You just need to try and understand or to look. And so you have this very sterile kind of environment, my studio in the art school. And then I have my experiences of working on a farm, where you're working with the fields and you're ploughing the fields and picking the stones and the sense of animals and the birth and the death, and there's these very powerful sensations, and the two were just... And farming was this very sculptural activity. When you plough a field, you're making this incredible sculptural gesture on the land. And that's, I think, when I shifted, and within about 3 months of going to art school, I never went into the studios. I worked outside. So there was that idea that art not being something that I express myself through, but actually feeds me, that teaches me. Now, over the years, I think I've learnt enough to occasionally say things about what I want to through the work. But I have to fill it up first. You have to feed first. And my art ultimately has a strong sense of nourishment. When I make permanent projects, that's like breathing out. The ephemeral work is like breathing in. And it's good to breathe out as well as in, so there's this kind of cycle. And drawing, the drawings that I showed you, are really just to try and explain the project. How it's a part of a language. I think the more interesting drawings are the ones that I make with the grass stalks. Those are drawings at its essence. Drawing that's trying to explore a space or to understand something. Those are really drawing. That's the essence of it for me. But the other ones, having said that, when I did the proposal for Marcelo loves computers. I mean, anybody who knows Marcelo knows this. He would have a chip in his... He says this. He would be connected all the time. So for Marcelo, I did some computer drawings in my proposal. They're the only ones I ever did. They were for you, Marcelo. But I have to say that the sensation of working with the computer, it's not tactile. It didn't create. I was very surprised that having a pencil and paper, even that little friction creates something in your head in a way that I think it's because you're working here and the mark is there or something. There's a disconnect, so it's not creative. It doesn't stimulate the... It's like there was a very interesting documentary or series of programs. It was like the Simon Sharma of my day, Jacob Bronowski, the mathematician. He did this incredible series called The Ascent of Man. And in it he's talking about art. And he said that the need to touch, and he said the hand is the cutting edge of the brain. And I was another example. I was in the. I made a sculpture for the Scripps Institute in California. It's a medical institute, very, very significant institute. And they had a department just to make models of viruses, just to make models, physical models. And I said to the man, why do you need to make a model when you have computers? He said, we need to put it in our hand. We need to have it in our hand, So, anyway, that was a little bit of a digression. Probably some terrible advice. I think the only advice I can give to, I failed to get in to my first art school, which was a very small school, to do a year, what we call foundation, before you go to do the degree like here, I guess. So I had to go to a different art school. When I applied for my degree, I was rejected from 3 art schools before I eventually was accepted at a very mediocre school in the north of England. It's a good school, it was okay. Because of that, I got very suspicious about institutions. And knew from the first day that I wanted to have a way of work that would not change the moment I left art school. And it didn't. And even though I was very poor and I was on what you probably don't have there, but we had a welfare, I worked as a gardener, and that's how it could have been for the rest of my life. But I always made art. And that's the thing I would say. Don't wait for your studio. Don't wait for your paper. Don't wait for your... Just make art. And the idea that art reflects wherever you are at that moment, even if you have no materials, even if you have no studio, it's a reflection of that. I think that would be the only thing. I should also say that I've given lectures at all the art schools that rejected me. I've got a whole heap of ideas about most of them. My partner, my girlfriend, won't let me do. She's an art historian, and she doesn't want there to be a shrine to me. She wants me to be just gone, which is probably the best way. She doesn't want to live with this kind of memory. But I used to say, because the black hole, especially in the early days, was an obsessive form, and I couldn't stop making it. And I just decided that I'm going to be making black holes for the rest of my life, and it possibly will be the last work that I make will be a hole. So that may give you a little idea of what. Although I've just had this really incredible idea, which I'm not going to tell you about. It's too complicated. Well, I can try. I've just done a big work for Buffalo, New York, the place where I proposed the tree growing out of the steps. And they get a lot of snow there and different weathers. And I've noticed when it snows or it rains, because I look at rain a lot and snow, how some parts become dry sooner than others, and the snow falls in, well, you won't know snow, but snow falls in different places for some reason. And I realized that if you put something under the ground, underneath, say, some gravel, you can't see it. But when it rains or it snows, the image comes out of the ground. This is really beautiful. So I've just made a big work that is hidden, and no one sees it unless it rains and dries or it snows, and this work comes out. I've just done some construction on my house, and I have a flat roof. Flat roofs are really boring to look at, so I wanted to make a sculpture on the roof. So this is where I thought I would make this idea, in the gravel of the roof. But then I went and made it in Buffalo. Whilst the construction's been going on, every time it rained, I lay down and made a shadow. So I have this whole series of shadows in different stages of the construction. And I thought, it would be so great to have shadows, human shadows, in the roof. And I thought, well, I could draw around me, but I don't do that. I don't. When I lie in the rain or make the front, it's my body that makes the shadow. It's not a replica of me. So I can't draw. It's funny how artists have rules, and you have to. It seems crazy, but these rules are really important because they're not there just for rules, they're for creative reasons. So when I make the ephemeral work, I only use my hands. But then when I make the permanent work, I use really big tools, But it's for each category has its certain rules, and they're creative reasons. Anyway, then I realized I can use my clothes, and I can put them in concrete, and then lay my clothes underneath the gravel. And the whole family are going to be underneath the gravel, kind of coming up and down when it rains. And and then you think, wow, if my father's dead, or he died several years ago, if you got your father's clothes and put them in the ground, and every so often he would be there and not. I mean, it's a very. I'm still trying to come to terms with this as an idea. That's why I was a bit reluctant about explaining it here, and it's probably so incoherent that no one understood it anyway, which is probably a good thing. It is very difficult to put into words what it is like at those moments, but it is. It's just as if some door has opened up to something there, and you were so unaware of it, and then when it is there, you can't believe you missed it, that you couldn't see it, and it was so obvious. And I think it's the kind of obviousness of it. Well, when I see that image, of course the light had to hit that just then, and it's, I think it's a moment of a kind of an insight or a moment of truth of some kind. That's and I live off that for days. I just live off it. Then I get hungry for another one. Well, I think sometimes a work like that, which was actually done maybe 15 years ago, was done by chance. And I think that now I'm really more interested in what will happen to something. So when I made the sort of serpentine icicle against the icicles, previously I would have taken the icicles away and made the sculpture around the tree, but now I'll work where the icicles form, knowing that if the icicles continue to form, the work will develop. So I'm much more conscious about the future of a work, what might happen to it. So yes, and I think that's a really, really significant kind of development in how I see the world. You know, when I first started working outside, it was just the moment. And then after, you know, getting a little older, you realize it's also that moment is because of the past. And then actually, because time is very important to me, the future becomes a very important idea and thing to work with also. Not that I'm trying to predict or control the future, but it's just that you're anticipating something that might, just like we all are. Our lives are ahead of us, you know. We're all trying to have some idea of what may happen or not, or you try and make things so things will go in a direction we like, but you never quite control that. Right, after, we'll go you next, okay?
Can you explain a little bit the concept of a certain timeline and how that fits into your work?
How I?
Explain a little bit the concept of the certain timeline.
All right. Yeah, well, I think that's become one of these forms I've got to stop making. I can't stop making the damn thing. And there are certain things that you just can't. And what I love about it is the movement and fluidity. And that's something I keep getting drawn to. But I am reaching a point where I feel, I've got to stop. It was like those the cone shaped. I stopped making those until I went to Australia and then made the one with the tree planted on it. But that's such a different one, you know. So I think there are times, there's always that danger with forms when they repeat. It becomes this imposition. And it's something you have to be very cautious of. And I'm feeling that with that particular form. Right, no, this guy here.
I just wanted to know how long did it take for your activity to become, to have some kind of financial intake to that? Because,
8 years from leaving art school. It took me 8 years before I filed my first tax return. Right, so it's not my website, it's the project's website. I'll be clear that I don't like websites. And it's called Alderney, A-L-D, oh, you could say that, Alderney.
A-L-D. A-L-D-E-R-N-E-Y-Y. Is there an E before the Y? Pegaram? Não. Vamos lá. A-L-D-E-R-N-E-Y. Alderney Stones, que nem pedras.
It gets updated every few weeks, but you can go right back and see the whole project. It's the only project that I have ever done that with, and I've really enjoyed having that, seeing it grow and change and having a forum for doing it. Okay.